Apologies for the delay. We had a little bit of a rocky start with a taxi driver taking our guests to a different location than he should have. It is my pleasure to welcome you today during the presentation of an exceptional book entitled Last Warning to the West, Hungary's Triumph over Communism and the Woke Agenda. The book is written by an American author, Shea Bradley-Farrell, president of the Counterpoint Institute for Policy, Research, and Education in Washington, D.C., a foreign policy and national security expert, and the first international fellow of the Hungarian Center for Fundamental Rights. It is exceptional because it draws on the lessons from the past struggle that our Hungarian brothers had with foreign oppression, and in particular against communism, and it attempts to give a warning and an advice to the West. It poses the thesis that these lessons are applicable to today's Western societies, and if they are not heeded, then we may follow the same path as Hungary did, but without an assurance of a successful outcome, which they enjoyed. We will start with a brief keynote speeches from the member of our board, Mr. Rafał Doroshinsky, which will be followed by Anna Lako from Center for Fundamental Rights, and then by Raphael Oduar from Patriots for Europe Foundation. We also have a joy and privilege to host today the Deputy Speaker of our Parliament, Honorable Krzysztof Bosak, who will be having a short message to us. He's going to have his message in Polish. The introductions will be followed by a chat between Chris and Shea. Chris Farrell is a member of the board of the renowned Judicial Watch Foundation and a host of his own TV show, Chris Farrell on Watch. Finally, we will have a panel discussion on the topic communist tactics against nation states in the European Union, where I will moderate, and the conversations will be held by Paweł Lisicki, Raphael Oduar, Karel Sal, and Rafał Doroshinsky. Now I would like to ask the representative of Ordo Iuris, Rafał Doroshinsky, to come to the stage and say a few words of introduction.
Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Ordo Iuris Institute, I would like to once again extend a warm welcome to you all at today's conference. I am delighted to see our just introduced guests and friends from the Czech Republic, France, the United States, and Hungary, as well as our friends from Poland. We have gathered here to discuss strategies for countering dangerous leftist ideologies in the European Union. Our focal point today is the presentation of an excellent book by Ms. Shea L. Bradley-Farrell, which chronicles Hungary's struggles against woke ideology. Indeed, the woke movement currently poses the most significant threat to Western civilization and to our fundamental, natural, and inalienable rights and freedoms. This leads us to a crucial question. What exactly is woke ideology? We will undoubtedly explore this topic in depth today. For now, allow me to offer a few brief preliminary observations. As we know, the terminology derives from the idea of having been awakened to an awareness of the allegedly systemic nature of racism, sexism, heteronormativity, and other oppressive power dynamics, and the true nature of privilege, domination, and marginalization in society. In a nutshell, it is a worldview that emerged from a fusion of critical theory, which is modified Marxism, postmodernism, and identity politics, which elevates identity groups especially those built on race, sex, and sexuality, to a near sacred status, treating them at the same time as the new proletariat and a tool for challenging the established principles for social life, as openly discussed by Herbert Marcuse, among others. Wokeism undermines or aggressively attacks the foundational principles of Western civilization. First of all, it attacks the essential tools for understanding the world: reason, philosophy, logic, and empirical science. It also views, quote, the impartiality of law, objectivity, colorblindness, and meritocracy, unquote, as instruments of dominant groups, calling instead of an emphasis on subjectivity. The underlying belief is that modern science is inherently racist, patriarchal, and colonial, and as such serves as a mechanism of human oppression. Secondly, it attacks the family and all norms regarding sexuality. For example from the United States, Black Lives Matter stated on its website, "We disrupt the Western prescribed nuclear family structure." Queer theorists openly declare their aim to deconstruct and destabilize categories of gender and sexuality. In this sense, wokeism extends the legacy of the sexual revolution. Thirdly, as pointed out by one of the founders of critical race theory, Professor Richard Delgado, it attacks the very foundation not only of Christianitas, but also of the classical liberal order, including the theory of equality, legal reasoning, Enlightenment rationalism, neutral principles of constitutional law, and the concept of the rule of law. Interestingly, woke is often referred to as a secular orthodoxy. However, it seems that it is far from being secular. On the contrary, with its new value system, new virtues and saints, as well as new wishes and sins, it should be recognized as a belief system. And it's a particularly toxic and destructive belief system, whose dogmas are radically opposed to obvious, basic, everyday truths. As a belief system or quasi-religion, it has its own denominations, like queer theory, post-colonial theory, certain types of feminism, and critical race theory. Among those denominations is gender ideology. Due to its radical detachment from obvious, basic, everyday truths, woke ideology requires constant artificial reinforcement. A vast apparatus is needed to hammer into people's minds that a union between two men is a marriage, and that gender is a subjective state. These are not ideas that develop naturally, organically, or spontaneously. They don't stem from the shared experience of all cultures, nations, or languages. On the contrary, they are imposed from above through universities, courts, international organizations, the media, and corporations. This anti-freedom despotic aspects of woke ideology is connected to the broader problem of systematically limiting various civil rights and freedoms: freedom of speech, freedom of conscience and religion, economic freedom, even the freedom to use cash or build single-family homes. These processes are occurring in parallel with the progressive federalization of EU structures, which brings to mind the experiences of communist states from the past. In such a critical, important time, Poland has seen power taken over by a coalition marked by completely submission to EU dictates. Today, we know that this was not without the help of an entire network of influence financed from abroad, including by USAID, while actively anticipating the fall of this harmful formation. We even more fervently support the struggles led by Hungary. I hope that today's conference and the reading of the West's last warning will become an impulse for all of us to engage even more in the fight for your freedom and ours, and for entire West. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for these inspiring words. Now I would like to ask Anna Lako from Center for Fundamental Rights to have a couple of words of introduction for us.
Thank you, Zbigniew, and thank you to the whole team of Ordo Iuris for organizing this event. Thank you to the Patriots for Europe Foundation also for helping. And thank you to Dr. Bradley-Farrell and Mr. Farrell for making this whole thing happen in the first place. And it is an honor to have Deputy Speaker Mr. Bozak here as well. But most importantly, I'm sorry to say that, but ladies and gentlemen, panie I panowie, two main reasons why we have gathered here today. For launching a book that is about matters that currently are the main concern of both Hungary and Poland. But the other reason is simply to meet our friends and allies. And this letter is just as important, especially now when there are many who will not spare any effort into driving a wedge into that centuries-old friendship that we have. We Hungarians have to confess that at first we were quite taken aback by the hostile nature of the new Polish government. And many Hungarians were asking the justified question, what friendship are we even talking about? But here in Central Europe, we have learned to look beyond the surface. And we know how to make a difference between voices that speak for a nation and voices that pretend to speak for a nation. And these voices that pretend to speak for a nation, we also have our fair share of our own traitors who claim to speak in the name of the Hungarian nation, so we get that. To anticipate the discussions that will take place at this event, the title of the book is very telling, Last Warning to the West. It brings Hungary's example to show the West what it should do to regain its identity. It asserts that we defeated communism and its most disgusting offspring, the woke ideology. Well, we sincerely hope that was true. We sincerely hope it will eventually become true. Indeed, a researcher, a political scientist, works with facts and figures. Facts and figures show that we are winning. A conservative government has been ruling in Hungary for 15 years now, with some considerable achievements. I don't go into details to bore you. But what has to be noted is that this whole social and economic progress has been achieved by during being constantly exposed to foreign attacks and permanent pressure, mainly by the left liberal leadership of the European Union. We all know that development funds due to Hungary are withheld for years. There are, of course, the ridiculous rule of law procedures and breach of obligation procedures orchestrated by Brussels bureaucrats. The left liberal NGOs are working at full steam. By the way, they are led by our own traitors, those second and third generation communists whose ambition is to become the procurators of foreign powers in the country. So in a nutshell, nobody else is interested in a self-confident, sovereign nation, proud of its own culture and its traditions. But, dear Polish friends, haven't we learned that during our centuries of shared history? I think we've seen similar pattern before. So a strong point of the book is that it presents efficient practices of the Hungarian government to defend its sovereignty. However, the fight is far from being over. If Dr. Bradley-Farrell, dear friend of Hungary, Shea, presents Hungary as a last warning to the West, we might in fact say that Poland is a last warning for Hungary. The Morawiecki government has fallen as a result of the work of the very same networks that are operating now in Hungary. To make a very long story short, because you know the exact things that happened in Hungary as well, Hungary is the last man standing, like it used to be many times throughout history. But if we fall, Polish deputy ministers will have no place to flee for safety. If we fall, the international left will not even bother anymore to keep up appearances of rule of law and democracy like now. Hence, it is of utmost importance to exchange our experiences and stick together. Because I am very sorry to admit that when it comes to networking and international relations, political alliances, we can learn the most, not from Hungary, but from the left. The parties of the left have or may have differing interests, and they may fight each other for positions, but they never forget about the big picture. They never forget about their ultimate goals, and they will stand by each other when the chips are down, especially. So Hungary has learned that lesson the hard way, and that's why we are trying to be the driving force and driving engine of networking between true patriots. It is no accident that the center of ours has just established a Polish-Hungarian Freedom Institute in Budapest with Mr. Farrell, because we want to express that jeszcze Polska nie zginęła. Let us remember one thing, just one thing as a closing, the ring of Saint Kinga, the princess of the Árpád dynasty. Legend has it that she dropped her ring accidentally in one of the salt mines in Transylvania, in our Transylvania at that time. And the ring was miraculously rediscovered in Wieliczka. This story represents the invisible link between our nations, the underground ways and connections we have to each other, even during hard times. So without further ado, I sincerely hope that this conference will add something to our shared fight. Thank you very much.
Passionate words from a passionate friend of Poland. I would like to ask Monsieur Odouar to join me on stage and have a couple of words of introduction on behalf of the Foundation Patriots for Europe.
Hello everyone. I'd like to start by thanking you for coming to this conference organized by the Patriots for Europe Foundation, the Center for Fundamental Rights, and the Ordo Iuris Institute. I would like to thank the Ordo Iuris Institute and the Center for Fundamental Rights for the help in organizing this event. I would like also to thank Dr. Shea Bradley-Farrell, President Bosak, and all of our speakers for being here. I am the director of the Patriots for Europe Foundation. The Patriots for Europe group was created just after the last European election. This election showed that the old right-left divide was no more. The opposition is now between the globalists, whether they are right-wing or left-wing, and the patriots. In your country, Poland, as well in mine, France, we saw conservatives in name only, making alliance with the left and sometimes even the far left in order to maintain the patriots out of power. The Patriots for Europe have been created to bring together patriots from all over Europe, such as the Rassemblement National in France, Fidesz in Hungary, the FPÖ, Vox, Lega, or the National Movement in Poland. The Patriots for Europe Foundation is the intellectual wing of our political family, who organize conferences and produce studies to promote patriotic and conservative ideas in Europe. Cooperation between patriots through Europe is key. At a time where the threats to our continent, our cultures, our nations are increasing, this cooperation between patriots is more necessary than ever. For a long time, the patriots just fought to defend their identity and their nation without taking account what was happening in other countries. But the fight now is international. The same dangers, like mass immigration, Islamization, globalization, wokeism, threaten all of our nations, and we have to fight together to protect both our national identities and culture and our common European civilization. This kind of event shows that we, the patriots, as a true defender of Europe, not the multicultural Europe of the leftist, neither the liberal Europe of the Bruxelles democracy, but the Europe of civilization, the one that generations of Europeans have built. Wokeism is one of these issues that concern patriots across Europe and even around the world. Everywhere, this new left is seeking to destroy identities, families, moral and religious values, and national pride. Everywhere, it seeks to make patriots and conservatives feel guilty and impose increasingly grotesque fads. Wokeism is an ideology which threatens all of our nations. The woke's determination to deconstruct all traditional values and national cultures knows no border. This ideology of death, coming from the USA, is subverting the nations of Western Europe and threatens to spread to Central and Eastern Europe too. It is important for patriots who have already come into contact with this terrible ideology to warn those who are not affected by the danger that awaits them. But at the same time, wokeism can also be an opportunity for patriots. The degeneration of wokeism also gives us the opportunity to change the image of conservatism and patriotism. Liberalism won the day in Europe and around the world because it emerged as a party of science, progress, and even just the joy of life against the rigid morality of the conservatives. But today, liberals have abandoned these battles, and we must stand up and retake them. We must be the movement of joy and freedom against the cancel culture, the movement of science and progress against gender denial and degrowth, the party of life and vitalism against those who are against natality, the party of the beauty of art, and the party of beauty and art against the ugliness of modern art. We must embody the party of true beauty, progress, science and joy against the new censors of political correctness. I hope you will enjoy the conference, and once again, thank you for being here.
For the next speech, I would like to ask English speakers to use their headphones. The Deputy Speaker of the Polish Sejm, Honorable Krzysztof Bosak, will speak to us. He's chosen to speak Polish.
Thank you for the invitation, and dear guests, I will speak in Polish. We will use the opportunity to speak Polish because we have translation. Szanowni Państwo.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to congratulate the organizers for having this event. It is a great joy for me as a leader of a party which is right now member of this network, this European family Patriots for Europe. To see how one of my dreams is coming true, the collaboration between the European NGOs, European conservative organizations from different countries who meet also here in Poland upon invitation of the Ordo Iuris and the Center for Legal Rights think tanks under the patronage of Patriots for Europe in the center of Warsaw, in the presence of leaders and representatives of different conservative media who will soon discuss about the danger related with leftist ideologies. I am very happy to see this collaboration in place. I think it is absolutely necessary. The Poles need Hungarians, and Hungarians need Poles, and we all need each other in this family, in this network of conservative organizations, national organizations, sovereignist organizations that has been shaped in the European Parliament and has been slowly moving out, moving beyond it, thanks to events like this and many others that have already been taking place and that will keep taking place in different European capitals within the framework of our collaboration. I'm also very happy to hear the discussion that is about to begin in a few minutes about another very interesting book presenting the phenomenon of Hungary, which we follow very closely in Poland. I believe Poland and Hungary are very important points of reference for each other because of their political experience. We observe each other's history. Right now in Poland, we're celebrating the millennium of Polish kingdom, and we see, so we can say that we follow each other's history for 1,000 years, drawing conclusions how our statehoods emerged and developed. We have similar history and experience of fighting for our liberty and independence, whether within the Austro-Habsburg, Austro-Hungarian Empire, or the prison of nations, as the Soviet system was, or right now, within the limitation of sovereignty under the European Union, where this limitation of sovereignty is what I refer to as ideological pressure and is becoming stronger, broader, sometimes without any basis in the treaties. The EU competences are expanded without asking us for our opinion. Right now, we're going to have over 20 new year groups that have received their citizen rights, and over 20 years of citizens who had no opportunity to discuss, to share their opinion on what is happening. The last referendum was about the joining the EU. There was 20 years ago, there was no discussion about energy policy, about climate. Everybody in Poland was assured that energy policy will be run by ourselves. Things like worldview, morality will be decided by ourselves. This would never be centralized at the EU level. These were the promises. Right now, we see that the situation is completely different. And this yoke has been put upon us. So we see the independence and sovereignty of the Polish state very seriously, and we will not give it up without a fight. We're not going to give it up at all, to make it clear. The situation we are having here, to expand upon some false excuse, to expand this European power to new areas, we see only as a temporary political pressure that we have to fight back against. It has been said clearly that the policy of on immigration and foreign policy, according to the treaties, should be a national competence only. Right now, the immigration treaty being expanded to us is a breach of a law, an absolute breach of the law and the agreements, and we are absolutely against it. Thankfully, in Poland, we have a consensus that few people, few of the EU supporters can know how to fight against it. That we don't know the euro. We don't want the euro currency in Poland after the euro crisis in the southern EU countries. So we have a stable majority against giving up the Polish currency. So we have a very strong social basis for that, to keep our own currency. And also, what few people remember, our own supervision of the capital market, of the finances. Because all these supervision would be, if we change the currency, everything would be controlled from Europe. All the financial institutions are centered, they have their headquarters in the West. And of course, it is the representatives of the old EU, the so-called old EU representatives, are dominating. As far as the similarity of experience between Poland and France is not only the fight for sovereignty in the past and now, but also very strong orientation towards the family. Both in Hungary and in Poland, we're looking for effective instruments for family-oriented policy. I believe that the success here is still ahead of us. But what is good news is that there are some nations that have not simply agreed that we need a population replacement, replacing ourselves with immigrants for all parts of the world. That this is the end of the story. Both Poles and Hungarians are looking for ways to defend their identity, to rebuild their demographic basis. Different instruments have been used in Hungary. We're observing that with respect and interest. I've been discussing these topics with the minister, family policy minister from Hungary, who visited us during the under Polish presidency. He said that over 20 different instruments have been implemented for family policy in Hungary. In Poland, so far, depends how you count them, but let's say to the allowance for the children and the tax discount. I hope that we can go further in the family policy in Poland, that we can rival Hungary in the sense of being as successful as they in rebuilding our demographic basis. Another important matter, important for both Poles and Hungarians, is the matter of defending the basic human rights, but in this conservative understanding, not this leftist, progressist understanding, the right to life. In Poland, we have an important parliamentary legal body of law, as well as the verdicts of the Constitutional Tribunal from different periods in different compositions, confirming the basic right to life of the unborn children. And we're very happy that also in Hungary there is this heartbeat act of law. We don't have an analog in Poland. Perhaps we should think about it. We can learn something from the Hungarians. Perhaps we can also teach the Hungarians something too, because we're looking in the same direction. Also, with regard to the protection of children against the ideology or program, what they of the LGBT lobby. It is a topic that is alive, that is important for the public. The majority of Poles and Hungarians alike are against indoctrinating children in the woke or progressive ideologies. And the last thing I'd like to refer to, ladies and gentlemen, is sort of a summary at the general idea of this the state system. I represent the tradition of the national democracy. Prime Minister Orban spoke about non-liberal democracy. I know that the Polish, many of the Polish representatives speak of national democracy, where it is the nation that should be the sovereign, the subject, the carrier of democracy. Even the politicians furthest to the west, to the left, do not question it, just try to change the way it's understood. This is a Polish Republican nationalist, a national tradition to fight for our national democracy. And the concept of the so-called liberal democracy in quotation marks, with a top-down progressive agenda is something that is sent to us from the West, which has no roots here, which has no basis in the constitution. We have Christian values, we have public morality in a constitution, which should be definitely treated with more respect. We have the good of the nation, and we have direct reference to God in the preamble to our constitution. And these are the things we're proud of. So, without further ado, I'm very happy to listen to this conversation. I'm very happy to have all the guests from abroad. Also from those central offices in Brussels. We also have a guest from the Czech Republic, from our partner institutions, perhaps from other countries. I'm very happy about it. Thank you very much for your invitation to share this keynote speech with you. And I wish you a fruitful discussion and a great visit in Warsaw on a very symbolic day when we've had a summit of the presidents at the Three Seas initiative, which shows that Warsaw is a center of regional collaboration in more than one aspect. We're speaking about identity, about programs, but the presidents of our countries today have been speaking in the Royal Castle here in Warsaw about the energy, transport, safety collaboration in Central Europe. And that's how it should be. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. These are very comforting words from a leader of the battle, from the battlefronts. Now I would like to invite Dr. Bradley-Farrell and Chris Farrell to the stage to have, take your time. Yeah, you, sure. I will ask for an autograph later on. Yeah, have a seat there. It is a little tight, apologies. So we would like you to introduce to us now the book. Tell us what were the inspirations. Why did you decide to write about a Central European country, which is probably not the most favorite topic of discussions in America? And tell us, how did you find lessons for the West in there? And give us some words of encouragement why we should buy this book and read it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Would you like me to start? This is not only my colleague, but this is my husband as well.
I'm uniquely qualified not just to interview her, but also to provoke her, so that the conversation is interesting and exciting, and we get into some...
Although after those wonderful speeches, I'm not sure how much to add to that. Those were fantastic.
Two things. First of all, thank you so very much to all of our good friends here in Poland, our hosts, our Hungarian colleagues, our friends from the Patriots. What an extraordinarily warm welcome, and what a very kind and welcoming environment you've given us. We appreciate it greatly. And like you were just saying, after these excellent opening remarks,
Quite an honor. From
We
the
can say thank you
Institute.
and leave. There were,
And also
you
from the
said
leader
everything
of the
exactly.
party. It's quite an honor. Thank you.
So just for background for folks, Dr. Shea comes to this work, comes to this book from a circuitous route. You have a bachelor's and master's degree in international development and a doctorate from Tulane University in New Orleans, Louisiana, in international development. You've worked in Senegal, South Africa, Jordan, Kuwait, and then you found yourself in Hungary, of all places. And so with that background in international development and working in places like Africa and the Middle East, draw the connection, get us to Hungary and tell us why you wrote this book.
Well, I went to Washington, D.C. about 10 years ago to work in international development in the Middle East and Africa, as Chris said. And I was working in an organization that is actually a leftist organization, but that's not what we did. I was in economic development, and I just kept my mouth shut, and I did my job. But being in D.C. made me realize that I was losing my freedoms. I was watching crazy things with the Congress. This was during the Obama administration, like the Equality Act, bringing the gender and the transgender ideology into mainstream, making it normal. And I was appalled. So I ended up working in the conservative movement because I thought I was losing my freedom. And in that time, I began working with the Hungarian embassy there because they reached out to me. And I will be honest with you, most Americans do not know where Hungary is, and that's a fact. But Magyar Ernye from the embassy there reached out to me and my colleagues and said, we have a lot in common. We need to join together. Would you like to come over and speak? Would you like to collaborate? Would you like to write a book? So I went to Hungary to write a book about their national identity. I didn't know what it was going to be about, but I knew that this little teeny country, compared to the United States, all of a sudden everybody knew who Prime Minister Viktor Orban was. The left either hated him, and then the conservatives loved him. But he was catapulted onto the world stage. And it was mind-boggling to me that this little country stood up against what I was learning more and more was a very woke Marxist agenda from the European Union. And I wanted to know why. So I went to Hungary and actually did interviews. I talked to regular people out in the countryside. One place was where Prime Minister Orban was born. Several other places, we went out into different parts of the country, but also with government officials and people in the city, university students. So besides collecting my history and the data and the economic information, et cetera, I talked to real people. I talked to people also in their 80s and 90s who were alive when the Russians came into Budapest. It made quite an impact on me. But the thing that really gut punched me was that in my interviewing, and this was now during the Biden administration, I had several Hungarians say to me, you know that the rhetoric coming out of the United States reminds us of our Soviet era, right? So I wasn't totally surprised because I was starting to put this together, but it hurt me. And one of the men from Prime Minister Orban's village, this big guy, a truck driver, we would call burly, very manly, he asked me in Hungarian, there was a translator, he said, do you see hope for America? And we were during the Biden administration, and we were very discouraged. We didn't lose hope, but we were discouraged. And this gentleman was crying, this big guy, and so I cried too, because it's my country. And he said, we used to look to America as a beacon of hope when we were under Soviet oppression for what we could be, what we could attain. And I told him, yes, I see hope because there's still enough Americans who believe in independence and sovereignty and freedom. And we certainly saw them rise up, and we have had a landslide victory with Donald Trump. But the reason the book became the last warning to the West is I realized that Americans, we don't remember what it's like not to be free. Many of your population here does. Many still living in Hungary, they remember what their freedom, they remember what it's like to not be free. And one of those older gentlemen that I interviewed, he had been a child in the countryside that fled to Budapest because they didn't believe that the Russians would make it to Budapest. And he and his family were hiding underground in Buda, where actually we stay very close to there when we go. And he was telling me, and the other gentleman told me also about, you know, the Russians used rape as a method of war. And it was a very terrifying thing. But I asked him at the end of the interview, what do you remember when the Soviets left? And he said, I remember the absence of fear. And so that's why this book became a warning to my people in America and in the West to say, you may not remember what it's like not to be free, but there are people who do, and you have to listen to them. And that's where I started to explain why communism, Marxism, is directly related to progressivism.
So written in really the darkest days of the Biden administration with an eye towards not just a warning, but also the hope of what could be. I think that the lessons from Hungary, but frankly, you know, in the same breath, you can reflect on the shared experiences and the special relationship between Hungary and Poland. There's so many parallels, there's such a depth to that history that much of what you wrote about concerning Hungary for an American audience would be almost just as applicable from the Polish experience. Yes. So in your book, you cite what I think is a very important document, because really this is an effort, at least my interpretation, my understanding, this book is written for an American audience. It's an effort to educate them and to inform their intellect about the spirit of the Hungarians. And in order to do that, you went to an old or older U.S. government document. Mm-hmm. It's a 1959 Department of Defense manual or publication discussing communist and Soviet psychological warfare. And that sort of illuminated or opened the door to how to think about not just the communist experience, but the woke environment now. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, because I'm a scientific researcher, so if I talk about something, I have to back up why. And ironically, in 1959, our Department of Defense wrote the 11 points of communist psychological warfare. It was meant to train our people, Americans working against the communists, the Soviet Union. I put them in the book because every single point applies to the European Union, but also to America under the Biden administration. We came this close, and we're still, I believe this is our very close to our very last shot.
Yes.
To losing our freedom. So I don't know how much you know what went on over there, but let me give you this example. One of the 11 points of communist psychological warfare is that you take over the media. So that's part of the Sovietization during the Russians coming into the countries that became satellite countries. you used that media as your propaganda arm. Now, everybody knows about this one, but maybe what you didn't know is that in America, the Biden administration sent officials from our different departments to Facebook, to X, to these other social media platforms, as well as to other media TV outlets, and told them, you must suppress people who are talking about election interference, people who are talking about COVID. That's not our truth, not our narrative. You must, this is where, disinformation and misinformation came out, and they were actually taken to court for this, because this is against our First Amendment of free speech. But that was a very chilling moment to me in my history as an American. Do you want me to pause there or share a couple others?
I was just going to run through a couple of the points, and then you can kind of,
Okay.
I think they'll be so painfully obvious of what we have, not just what Americans have suffered, but what everyone has suffered. And some really stick out. They really are profoundly painful to us. So, a leadership cadre of fanatics that are driving a political agenda.
Right.
Propagandists, you talked about the media being captured, sowing hatred, and relying on and developing a very docile, very compliant population. So when they direct that there's lockdowns and forced vaccinations, what does the population do?
And that was one of the 11 points as well, using a crisis to take control. We saw that all around the world during COVID with mandatory lockdowns, mandatory vaccinations. Thousands and thousands of people in the United States lost their jobs because for one reason of conscience or other, they didn't want to take the vaccine. But also, on the opposite side, one of those points of warfare was to suppress your political opponents to the point that they have no will to fight anymore. They are filled with fear, with neurosis,
Yeah.
with debilitating anxiety.
Yeah.
Our former president, Trump, was indicted 4 times on baseless accusations. And we see that here in the EU. We've been watching it with Romanowski, with Marine Le Pen, and there's quite a few, George Askew, in my opinion, there's quite a few examples of that. So it's...
I wanted to that point,
Okay.
Vice President Vance at the Munich Security Conference just a couple of months ago pointed out that, the greater threats to our European and NATO allies aren't necessarily coming from Russia or China or some other military threat, but Vice President Vance, and I believe that you agree with this, but talked about these disturbing trends of censorship and lawfare and dismissing nationalist, populist voices.
Yeah.
And he got a lot of criticism for that, but I think that you agree. Is that true?
Well, I do, and I'm preaching to the choir, as we say in the United States, because you understand this, obviously, from your speeches. But I wanted to explain to Americans that nationalism is not a dirty word. Yes, the Nazis, yes, the Soviets used nationalism in the way that they wanted in order to take control. But nationalism itself is the basis of a democracy, because we come together as one unit, we decide what kind of law we're going to use, we decide what kind of economic system we're going to have, and you have to have that national identity and understanding to have democracy, and here's why. And actually, Sir Roger Scruton pointed this out to me in some of his writings. If we don't come together and decide what our society is as a people, then those who think they're the leaders end up doing that. So they are the one making the decisions and not the people. And America was never based on that. It is we the people, but our people have forgotten that and become very soft. And that's why it was so important to me to share Hungary's history. There's a little bit of Poland's history in here as well, because I know even with the EU, with the sanctions, you have been through so much. And, but I'm not an expert on that, so I humbly would like to learn from you.
I think that's an interesting point, sort of philosophically and political philosophy in the United States. And like you mentioned, a lot of people have forgotten this, but we hold that the people are sovereign and our government officials are merely trusted servants. They do not rule. And that certainly is not the message from Brussels. Brussels bureaucrats view that they rule, that they hold the sovereignty,
Yes.
and that the public, you're merely subjects who, if you're fortunate enough, they will grant you certain rights and privileges. And that's the polar opposite, the complete flip side of how America views itself. But, like you said, Americans get a little, fat, dumb, and happy. And we forget that the first three words of our Constitution is we the people, not us the government.
And can I give them a little bit of hope, though?
Sure.
Because I forgot who was talking about U.S. Agency for International Development,
Yeah.
or USAID. I'm very sorry. I apologize. But the Trump administration has already reduced that agency to only 18% of what it was. It has moved under the State Department with Marco Rubio, our Secretary of State, and they are trying to destroy what I was working against during the Obama administration, but the social, especially the social ideology programs being pushed into other countries. Nobody would listen to me at that time because Americans don't really understand what our foreign aid is being used on. When they know, they don't agree with it and they don't want to do that. Even Americans who support abortion don't want to pay to advertise that overseas.
Give a couple of examples of USAID, not just funding crazy things, but because they do a lot of that, or they used to do a
Yes.
lot of it, not anymore, but also using foreign assistance to advance other radical agenda ideologies.
You talking about like under Biden or Obama or both? Because it started with Obama.
Yeah, you can take it from Obama and Biden, but just because I don't know that everyone necessarily appreciates how insidious
Yeah, it was
the attack was.
There are very few people in D.C. until now, under this present administration, that actually know what was going on. Under the Obama administration, we had programs like being LGBT in Asia, or transgender was the Purple My School initiative to children. And I have at home papers that where we were, USAID was giving this papers to children with a scale where you could decide that day whether you feel like a man or you feel like a woman, or do you feel like homosexual or do you feel heterosexual? What right do we have to do that in any country? And I wrote a very long policy paper about it and some news articles because I was trying to explain you're trampling on people's religious freedom, their freedom of conscience, and actually I was a big fan of Pope John Paul II, who coined that phrase, ideological colonization. So I went to the UN, I went to the Obama administration, then when Trump was in last time, and tried to explain to them, we're spending billions of dollars on this nonsense, and people don't like us for it.
I guess, another technique or tactic, and this comes up in the 11 psychological warfare points, but it's best exemplified in what you were just talking about, is this idea of capturing language. The semantic domination where their terminology, their language, their demands, their agenda is dominant. And if you come from a position of traditional family oriented foundation, you find yourself adrift. You've been excluded. You've been pushed away. Maybe.
Well, that's part of what Marxism does also. It was mentioned earlier about making divisions between people, because then you can control people better. If everybody's divided, they're not together. That's why the communists took over religion, because you can't have something else to rely on. They have to be in control. And in the United States, we've really done a job on that, to the point of, under the Biden administration, we were funding transgender ballroom dancing in Peru. And that's not a lie.
Literally, that was a program.
That's a program.
So this book is written in the very depths of the Biden administration, the darkest days. As it becomes published, and we have, thankfully, the re-election of President Trump.
Yeah.
You mentioned that they indicted him 4 times, but I think it's important to reflect and kind of really looking forward, especially since the news media is making such a big deal out of today being 100 days of Trump's presidency. So they tried to bankrupt President Trump through lawfare. They tried to jail him, and then they tried to kill him twice. But somehow the American people, they had X-ray vision, right? They could see through all of the sort of frantic, hysterical claims about him. Right. And they've returned him to office. That's really the hope that you talk about in your book.
That's right. And I do want to, end with that hope that we feel, because examples, first day on the job, President Trump declared that a man, there are 2 sexes. Who would have thought we had to do that? But he declared that as an executive order. He has said about taking the diversity, equity, inclusion, critical race theory, et cetera, out of our military, so that we are focused on combat power and not this woke nonsense that keeps us from doing things. But I really think that we have an opportunity right now, and that has been my broader message. I believe, and if you wanted to talk about tariffs, we could, but I think we're running out of time. But I believe that President Trump is setting about to recreate the global economic and political system away from this globalist agenda and focused on sovereign nations. If you look at his speeches, even during the first administration, he is encouraging nations to be sovereign and to love their own culture, to love their history. So I believe that this is a chance right now. Someone also mentioned about the collaboration between the conservatives. I came because they reached out to me. I didn't know I was needed or wanted. And now I have friends in Conservative Party in 15 minutes, that much. Oh, okay, I can slow down a little. I thought she was giving me the hook. But I have friends in the Conservative Party, in the institutes in Austria, in Hungary, in Italy, in Poland.
In Argentina.
In Argentina. Chris and I went down there in October and met with the vice president to talk about these things. So what I have learned, going back to Trump, is the leftists pushed Americans too far. And they said, oh, this looks bad. We better go vote. So we did, and we had a landslide victory. And I really believe this could be an opportunity for us to defeat the globalist agenda in a great way over the next 4 years. If we come together, if we work together, even the tariff thing is an opportunity, to change both of our economic systems as we're cutting. The European Union, in my opinion, needs to cut a lot of regulation, encourage innovation, and I'll pause there because I'm going on and on.
So we've been in Europe for the last 2 weeks, going around making various presentations. I wanted to touch on what you see on television, because whether you're watching BBC, Eurovision, France 24, Sky News, any of the English language television coverage that we've been watching, there is a representation a cartoonishly simplistic, hysterical, frantic representation of President Trump as a maniac, as a lunatic, as erratic, unstable, irrational, a danger, a threat. He's going to destroy the economy of the world. He's going to withdraw from NATO. He's going to, all this, I believe, incredibly reckless language. What should our friends here, Polish friends, Hungarian friends, European friends generally, how should they really understand and comprehend the man versus what's on television?
Don't believe the nonsense, and we need to get conservative media over here, so we're getting it back that way as well. That's one thing. Like, Viktor Orban has these points of taking back society, right, to the conservative, the tradition viewpoint. And one of them is to take back the media. So, yeah, since we've been here especially, and we've spent a lot of time in Hungary over the past few years, it's a lot of hysteria all the time because they use fear to make everybody watch, right? And as far as President Trump goes, I worked alongside the first administration that he had, advising in different ways from a policy institute. I went to the United Nations. He was trying to get out of the United Nations then the use of sexual reproductive health or access to abortion. He was trying to get that out of resolutions at that time. He was trying to get that out of the State Department. A lot of Americans don't know that he took our policy that kept us from funding abortion access overseas, and he expanded it to like $8 billion. None of this healthcare, our spending on healthcare overseas, could be used to promote abortion. Now Biden came back in office and he took it away. I'm only giving you a few things because there are so many. Nobody's perfect, but I saw him and his administration, I worked with them, try to bring God and family and country back into our system. And, on a personal note, 2 years ago, Chris and I were down working on the border. We do a lot of border security work, and it was crazy. We had no border. And I was invited to go and speak to President Trump, no longer president at that time, obviously. It was during Biden. But to give him a briefing on what was going down at the border. So we flew to Mar-a-Lago, and we sat down with him, and we were told, you have 10 minutes. His people said, you have 10 minutes, and you have to get out. Well, he sat there with us for an hour, talking about immigration problems, talking about China, or China, as he says, talking about what was going on with the Ukraine war. His heart was heavy for the world and for the American people because of the direction that we were going in. And so that's when I realized, too, he's really a kind person. And sat there for an hour with us in his golf clothes, and then wouldn't let us leave until he bought us breakfast at Mar-a-Lago. So anyway, it was just very impressed upon me that he passionately cares. And do you want me to?
No, I was gonna just mention that a mutual friend of ours says something I think that's very simple, but it's very powerful. And in my view, it reflects on Dr. Shea's book here, and that is that, and this meeting is actually a living example of it. Our friend says, encouragement is like oxygen. Because we all get wrapped up in our struggles, in our fights. Sometimes the fights are very bitter and very hard. And like a fighter, you have your head down and your hands up, and you're busy defending yourself, trying to move onto the offensive, and it's very trying. It is very physically, emotionally, mentally demanding. And there's a reason why they have a fight that's broken up into rounds, right? And so after a certain time, they ring the bell, and there's a pause, and the fighters go back to their corners, and they take a breath. They get oxygen, right? this kind of a forum, this kind of a discussion, this kind of an alliance with our friends from Ordo Iuris, from Patriots Foundation, from the Center for Fundamental Rights. This is oxygen, encouragement with each other. You're not alone. You're not isolated. You're not crazy. You're not, an extremist. And the beauty of what Dr. Shea has written in her book is that it captures that spirit, and you've really given people a handbook. You've given them not just the history and background, but you've given them a way forward.
Yes, because, and I based it on Orban's 12 points because they're so practical. He's very pragmatic, right? Very practical in what he does. One of the things he says that we must do is to form our own institutions. So I got to meet him at CPAC Hungary, and I was like, I did that? And he said, I know. So, but institutions like what you guys have is so important. And I know as the director or president of a nonprofit, an NGO working on conservative foreign policy, I know that it's not easy. It's hard to raise money, to get people to come, but we have to do this. We have to collaborate. I hope if you can, you'll come to CPAC Hungary. And there was one more thing I was going to say about that. It was very important, but I forget what it was.
I just think going forward, for people who are frustrated, or people that are angry, or they feel that if only, or I just want to be able to do something, your book and what you lay out in it, it brings people's awareness, it educates and informs, but it also inspires. And
thank you, I appreciate that.
Like Prime Minister Orban said, we have a way forward, we have a path, and it's the encouragement people are looking for.
And there's simple points, like the institutions. Well, maybe you're not a build an institution person, but there are other things like you're talking about, collaborating together, letting your government know that you have a voice and you like what they're doing, you don't like what they're doing, because the people are what's most important, as we were talking about. And the truth is, truly, I said this last night, we were in Vienna speaking last night, when I get on a plane and come, I think, oh, I'm working, I'm always excited, but it's work, I'm working. And then I get here, like last night, and I walk away like on cloud 9 because I'm encouraged, because I find out that we're not the only people that are what Biden termed domestic terrorists or extremists. And I'm being silly, but I'm making a point, because our own president, because of our conservative views, the Biden administration literally labeled us as domestic terrorists in a speech that he gave. That's a very serious accusation. So I come to these and I realize that what we're doing is right and we have support.
Dr. Shea, last warning to the West. It's not just Hungary's victory over communism and the woke agenda, it's Poland's. And it's a lot of our good friends in the European Union and our NATO allies. Thank you very much.
Thank you guys very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think it's a great encouragement to read the book. It's not a difficult read. It's full of kind words to the Hungarian struggle and to Hungary, and it doesn't miss Poland as well. So I encourage everybody to read this book. Now, let's move on to the next part of the program, and that is a panel discussion. I would like this to happen in 2 tours. First, each of the participants will have 5 minutes to talk about what they perceive from their own perspective as the main threats, the main communist threats to European nation states. And then in the second round, they'll have a chance to either address what the other participants said or give a diagnosis of what needs to be done, what is being done to protect ourselves, because this fight is not over. Our enemies are not asleep, and we need to be vigilant, and we need to continue the fight. So let me invite to the stage, first of all, Mr. Paweł Lisicki, the editor-in-chief of one of the most important conservative weekly newspapers in Poland, Do Rzeczy, a journalist, a writer, a translator, a Catholic apologist, and a great expert in all things considering the fight between the good and the evil. And then let me invite to the stage Raphael Odouar, the director of Patriots for Europe Foundation, specialist in comparative politics, straight from Paris, I guess. Yes. Almost, through Vienna. Let's welcome Dr. Karel Sal, a friend from the Czech Republic, Institute for Politics and Society. A think tank of the ANO movement, a specialist in electoral systems, behavior, and group targeting, on opinion polls, focusing on disintegration of traditional ideological systems, freedom of speech. And last but not least, let's welcome Mr. Rafał Doroszyński, member of the board of Ordo Iuris Foundation. One of the largest think tank in Poland, one of the largest conservative think tanks in Europe, active in the European Court of Human Rights, in the United Nations, in the EU. So maybe let me take a seat next to you. We were asked, or you were asked, to give us your perspective on a topic, communist tactics against nation states in the European Union. Let me start with Mr. Lisicki. Communist project started in 1848 with the Communist Manifesto, printed in London, in the West, but the first implementations were moved to our broad region. We had the two revolutions in Russia. We had a communist revolution in Hungary, two communist revolutions in Germany, and a 2-year Polish-Soviet war. Since that time, the methods have changed. There's no violent overthrows of government, at least not for now. But there's something eerily similar in this value systems of today's communism that changed locus and lives in the West again. The stance against family, the stance against marriage. Could you tell us your perspective on where the main threats to nation states come from, and perhaps give us a little bit of color of what is it based on historically? Why is it so similar to those ideas from the past?
Thank you very much for invitation. I will just try to answer the question. But first of all, let me say a few words concerning the book, because I have such a habit that I usually read books which I'm talking about, and I must say that it's really an excellent book. And even more, after reading this book of Ms. Farrell, I had a feeling of jealousy that there is no such a book written in Polish. Actually, it's a very interesting thing, because we are talking so much about special relationships between Hungary and Poland. The only one book written on Mr. Orban, so far as I remember, it was written in 2012 by Polish journalist Mr. Igor Janke. The title was The Attacker, the Napastnik in Polish, the attacker. And actually, Mr. Janke completely changed his mind during this time. And he's just one of the most distinguished critics of Mr. Orban and his politics. So it is a big lack of this kind of analysis which you've done. And I hope might be it would be possible to translate it into Polish, because it is not. I don't agree that it is just for the American audience. It could be also for the Polish audience, especially the last part of the book, in which you try to explain the phenomenon of Orban and of his policy. So congratulations once more. And so the question concerning the communism and the position of ideology and so on. I will start with a short anecdote, I would say. It was in 2021, I had to publish the collection of my essays from last 30 years. The title of the book was Counter-Revolution, so the title speaks for itself. And just in time, when I've been working on this introduction, there was the interview with the American ambassador in Poland, that was Georgette Mosbacher. She went to the Polish Polsat television and she said, "You, Poland, you are on the wrong side of history. Because in questions concerning LGBT movement and in questions concerning gender agenda, you are just on the wrong side of history. You must adjust, you must accommodate, and so on." But the worst thing, the most shocking thing, is that Ms. Mosbacher was nominated by Donald Trump. She was, unfortunately, she was not a nominee of Biden administration, Democrat, Obama, and so on. Unfortunately, she was the nominee of Donald Trump. She went to the Polish public television. Actually, she went to all the possible televisions at that time with exactly the same revolutionary message. You have to adjust. You have to accommodate. You are on the wrong side of history. You must change. And just exactly the same time, I've read the very interesting book, might be you know it, that is the book of Rod Dreher, Lived Not by Lies, in which he exactly had this impression, this experience which you try to describe in your book, that it is something very unusual, very strange in the American in the American atmosphere. So coming back to the subject of the discussion, the shortest possible way connecting the Communist Manifesto from 1848 and the present the radical leftists, I would say that is the rejection of any kind of reality, rejection of anything what is natural and anything what is eternal. In Communist Manifesto, one of the most interesting caption is written like that. That is the words of Engels and Marx. We are against any kind of eternal truth, any kind of eternal values, against anything what is unchangeable and what is stable. And I would say that it is the source, the main idea of the present revolution, which we observe in different positions. To be against anything what is natural, anything what is real, and just to reject a norm. There is no norm, there is no reality, there is no truth, and instead of truth, we have only to do with construction. So we are able to construct anything. We can able to construct gender, sex, history, identity, nation, whatever. And that is the main thing connecting the old communist ideology from the 19th century and the present one, which we can observe in different ways, either in European Union or in some part of American radical liberalism.
Okay, thank you very much. This is a very profound diagnosis of where the entire hostility against our families and against our nations come from. I'd like to turn to Mr. Audouard now and ask him about the perspective that you, living in France, have regarding the methods that are being used against our nations. Are they different? Are they differentiated by nation? Or are they the same? We have throughout Europe situations like Călin Georgescu and Marine Le Pen, which seem eerily similar. We have the prosecution of Donald Trump in the United States before he became president again. We have the prosecution of Bolsonaro in Brazil, and we have the prosecution of Salvini. Are these uniform methods used throughout the world? So I would like to ask you, from the French perspective, what are the top threats and whether you see them as common to all the nations, or is there any special approach in France?
I think that, of course, there is some details, there is some differences between the situation in the different nation states, but in the end of the day, the tactic are basically the same. You have cited the situation in France with Marine Le Pen and the situation in Romania, and we have basically the same, like in these two countries. The judicial system, where they saw that they can't win against the Patriots, they say, okay, you can't be candidate. Like in Romania, they stopped the second round to be held, and after that they stopped the Patriot candidates to be candidate. And in France, a few weeks ago, the justice just banned Marine Le Pen to be candidate for the next presidential election. So in these two cases, we see that they have this capacity of adaptation. And I see that really, in the end of the day, of course, we can have discussion about what is in the root of the woke ideology, what the link with Marxism, what is in details, what they want to do against family, against LGBT issue. But I think what their real strength is their capacity to change the perception of reality and to make the people think things very different the way things are. Like, for example, in France, more than 2/3 of the population is against mass immigration. People are actually in favor of most of what Rassemblement National is saying. It's the same in lots of countries, but the media, the justice, Hollywood, the cultural world, they have this capacity of what we call diabolization. So saying, okay, maybe what these people are saying about family, about nation, about immigration is right, but in fact, they are not just patriots, they are not just conservative, they are fascists, they are Nazis, they are racist, and that's really what it's powerful with them. The same with what happened with Marine Le Pen, like say, okay, we will fight to defend democracy by stopping some very powerful candidates to be candidates. Like Marine Le Pen is right now at 35% in the polls. The candidate Georgescu in Romania, he was around 30% too. And these people have this capacity of saying, okay, we'll stop these people of being candidates, but it's to defend democracy. We will stop. We know that the people, the working class and the middle class, they are in favor of limiting immigration, they are in favor of defending family, but we'll do the opposite, but not because we are against them, but because we know better than them what is good for them. We are the real Democrats, and we want to defend democracy against the people. We want to defend the nation states against the patriots. We want to defend values against the conservative. Like, they have really this capacity of doing totally the opposite of what they are saying. And it reminds me this quotation of Solzhenitsyn, like they are lying. We know that they are lying. They know that they are lying. They know that we know that they are lying, but they continue to lie. And that's basically the situation right now in the West. Like everyone knows that Clinton, Kamala Harris, Macron, Edouard Philippe, they don't care about patriotism. They don't care about moral values, but they continue to pretend that they do. The same in Hungary. Like Peter Magyar, the candidate who is against Mr. Orban, is saying that he's a patriot. He's doing this big meeting with lots of Hungarian flags. He's in this kind of traditional costume from Hungary, saying that he wants to defend conservatism. He wants to defend the right, that is right wing. But at the end of the day, he's just a globalist, and everyone knows that. So, and in lots of cases, we are not fighting against official leftists. We are fighting against conservative in names only. We are fighting against socialists who don't care about social issues, who don't care about the working class, who don't care about the workers. They just defend the globalists. We are fighting against conservative who don't care about moral issue, about family, about things like that. We are fighting against so-called patriots who don't care about immigration. So that's always the case. We are fighting against people who don't believe in anything, but who use this socialist or conservative or patriotic elements to attract people, but there is nothing behind this. I really think that's their main strength right now. This capacity of pretending to defend values they don't defend anymore.
Thank you very much. Mr. Saal, I wanted to ask you about the Czech perspective. The Czechs are level-headed, very efficient in what they're doing, and it seems like you were quite successful in protecting your country in a number of ways. I wanted to ask you, where do you see the main threats to your statehood? And I wanted to also ask you, because you are a specialist in the electoral systems, whether you see a possibility of influencing or threatening our democracies and freedom through the electoral systems.
So 2 questions. First, I am glad to be here for an invitation, and I heard many words about this Polish-Hungarian friendship, but what about Czechs? We are here too, and we are not that good Christians. 70% of Czech people are atheists, but we have the same feeling. Something went terribly wrong, and especially in Europe. And it's not about Christianity, about values. It's about how we manage this European Union and how we manage this common rule in Europe. Everything, because the nations of Eastern and Central Europe have one advantage. We lived for 40 years in communism, and we can smell communism from the distance. And what is the point? What is the point of all totalitarianism and all authoritarian regimes? It's fear. You said that. It's fear. It's fear about you cross the invisible line made by net of rules which are not written. And when you cross this line, you are gone. In communist times, you spent few years in prison. Those times, you will be doxxed, you will be harassed, you will be punished for your words, and that's the fear among us in those times. And that means our society is not fully free. This is the beginning, this is the main point of our living in Europe, and we must fight this fear. Only when you haven't fear, you are a free man. That's the first part of question. A second one, the election rules are very complicated things. And after years and years, many more laws emerged. And more laws emerging, that means less competition between those parties. Because all laws against money laundering, all laws you must compel to run, for example, to parliament, that means you need money. And that state conservates current state and supports current parties in Europe, and making this system old and not efficient. So we need open the political competitiveness in Europe and make less rules in Europe right now. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. You see, our governments are now quarreling between Poland and Hungary, so we have to look each other deep in the eyes and declare our true feelings. And with the Hungarians, we don't have that situation with the Czechs, so maybe that's why we're quiet. Let me ask Mr. Doroshinsky now. You are one of the leaders of a legal think tank that is working for the legal order in Poland and throughout the world. And I wanted to ask you about the threats that are coming to the national sovereignty through the legal system. What is your perception on that? And we are sort of engaged as a think tank in a project to defend our sovereignty right now. But you're also an author of a book regarding hate speech, which is this club, this tool that is going to take the rest of our liberty if it is promulgated. Could you share your perspective on the threats from that?
Yes, sure, thank you. Just before I start, just let me remind about Visegrad group. So we have kind of ally between Hungary, Poland, Czech Republic and Slovakian Republic. So that's the symbol of friendship also. Regarding the words of Redaktor Lisicki, just one thing. You mentioned about that Marx and Marxism rejecting reality, eternal truth. It reminds me about the words that Karl Marx has written, that his aim is the ruthless critic of all that exists. The ruthless critic of all that exists. And just compare it to what you can find in the Bible, that after the God created the world, the God has said, and everything what God created was good. Everything was good. And Karl Marx is saying, my aim is the ruthless critic of all that exists. So that's powerful, quotation from Karl Marx, and comparing it to what you find in the Bible is to me very powerful also. But regarding the question and the threat to national sovereignty and the threat to basically freedom of speech, I would say that the freedom of speech is the first victim of every dictatorship. The first regulation Adolf Hitler announced after gaining the power was related to freedom of speech. And every dictatorship is aiming to limit the freedom of speech, because without freedom of speech, you cannot have free discussion. That's obvious. You cannot have a free society. So that's why the freedom of speech is so important for every bureaucratic structure like European Union. Every structure that doesn't love freedom, and it's easy to show how European Union is focused on limiting the freedom of speech, and there is a number of tools that the European Union uses to limit that freedom. And one of them, or one of the most important of them, is the regulation concerning so-called hate speech. Hate speech which has no legally binding definition. Nobody, in fact, knows what hate speech is. But European Union constantly and systematically tries to fight the hate speech, perceiving that activity as a tool for limiting freedom of speech, and on different levels it is being done. Like, for instance, on the level of education, you can find the publications of European Union, of European Commission, that it instructs the teachers, public officials, police, and so on, how to detect hate speech. And in that publications, you can, for instance, find the pictures and the pictures showing two women with a child, and there is a question: what do you think about that picture? And it turns out that every answer, other than total acceptance, is regarded as a hate speech, a different level of hate speech, certainly, but only fully acceptance of that picture is regarded to be okay, is regarded to be fine. Or there is a picture of, there's an example of City Hall in Madrid, which shows the rainbow flag. And the question is, what do you think about that? And also, every every opinion that is not fully in agreement with that kind of behavior is regarded as a hate speech. So the level of education is the basic level on which European Union, according also number of NGOs and so organizations are working to create that tools that aims to limit the freedom of speech. But social media is the another field on which European Union is very active. For instance, in 2016, it adopted code of conduct on countering illegal hate speech online, and it was signed by Facebook, Microsoft, Twitter, YouTube, and so on. And there is a provision according to which the number of NGOs is to be, but those corporations are to be evaluated by those NGOs. And what are those NGOs? All of them are left-wing organizations. So they are the ones who are who should evaluate how Facebook, Twitter, YouTube work. And another level is penal sanctions. On European Union, there is only a limited number of areas of issues where Europe can impose the penal threat. I mean, that can be regarded as a so-called Euro crime. And among those are human trafficking, terrorism, smuggling of weapons, and so on and so on. And European Commission wants to add to those limited list of the crimes like human trafficking and terrorism. They want to add to that list hate speech. So that also shows how they are focused, obsessed on that concept. And finally, disinformation. Disinformation is another tool of infringing the freedom of speech, and that's a very strange and interesting system that was created around the concept of disinformation. So you have a European Commission, you have IT corporations, and you have the fact-checking organizations. What's interesting, fact-checking in 2014, there was only 44 fact-checking organizations in the world. And in 2021, there was also 400 fact-checking organizations in the world. So what's behind that statistic? Behind the statistic is that mechanism, that system of funding that fact-checking organizations by organizations like Facebook, Google, YouTube, and so on. And those organizations are obliged to fund that fact-checking organizations by the Code on Fighting Disinformation. That's a document created by, surprise, European Commission that was signed with those organizations. So they are paying to fact-checkers organizations in order to check those IT corporations. And in order to be on the list of recognized fact-checking organizations, you need to be either the member of International Fact-Checking Network, which is funded by Open Society, Soros, Gates, Google, and so on. So the organizations that are support of Democratic Party in the United States. So that's one of the possibilities. You are enlisted and on that list. And the second one is that you are part of European Digital Media Observatory, which is created by European Commission. And that's how you are listed on the list of fact-checking organizations. So that's a fake system that is designed to subvert the freedom of speech and to limit the free debate in European Union and European countries, and we observe it every single day.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. This is a crushing diagnosis. Could we come back to Mr. Lishitsky and ask him if you could pass the microphone, please? And ask for, so we're together, as Mr. Bosak said, so that's one first step. What could we do? What should we do? And what is being done in order to oppose these threats?
Okay, what should we do, or what can we do? Might be, I'm not going to say anything really original, but I'm going to use some parts, some excerpts of your book, of the 12 points of Mr. Viktor Orban, because I think actually that is the actual reset. That is the best way how we should follow to have this kind of success. Of course, maybe I wouldn't quote all the 12 points, but some of them are really well worth of consideration. Let's say the first point, which might be the most important one. Play by your own rules. That is a very important thing. It means that we cannot win if we continue to accept the solutions and paths offered by others that we know are wrong. That is also something what Mr. Bosak said. Actually, we have to follow our own rules and try to impose them and not to take them from outside and to try to accommodate ourselves. Second, what is also a very important thing, but it's rather more general, implement conservatism in domestic politics. That is rather general rule, which might be not so. We have to talk about it longer, but this what is surely very important and what is strictly connected with the previous speech of Mr. Dorosiński. We must have the media. That is a very important point concerning all conservative policy. As Orban said, that is the quotation, as Orban said in his CPAC Hungary 2025 speech, left-wing opinions only appear to be in the majority when the media helps to amplify them. The root of the problem is that the modern Western media aligns itself with the views of the left. That is exactly truth. And that is exactly the problem. We have to change the structure of the media structure in each particular country. And that is the big success of Mr. Orban, which he was able to carry out. And unfortunately, it is exactly this what was neglected by the Polish right during the last 8 years. And the present situation is, as one can see, we have, of course, one big conservative television, Republika, which is quite a strong one, but it is strong one in terms of reach, but not in economical terms. And actually, of course, there are some conservative media like My Weekly, like some others, but it is completely incomparable to the enormous position and strength of the left liberal media in Poland. So it was a complete neglect, in my opinion. Unfortunately, we didn't use this advice of Mr. Orban in Poland. There might be just two other rules which are quite important. It is also interesting from the point of view of strategy. Expose your opponent's intentions. Reveal the underlying intentions of the progressive movement confidently and early. Expose it and don't vacillate. That is very important. Not to resign, not to give up, just to expose, just to show what is the real aim, what is the real purpose of their agenda, so as to be able to object, to reject these wrong ideas. That is also interesting, but it is rather a kind of tactic proposal. Stay away from extreme theories. Whether on the right side or on the left, stay away from extreme political or social ideology. That means, in my opinion, that the conservative counter-revolution should be also a kind of moderate counter-revolution. So it must be a prudent one, not in these terms extreme or radical. And maybe the final point, as I said, there are 12, so I just was able to mention only some of them. And that sounds good, and as we all know, it is very difficult to carry it out. I mean, build institutions. That is something what we surely agree upon. But the point is that our institutions are much weaker. I mean, our conservative institutions, and the network of the conservative institutions is much weaker than this network and then these institutions which the left was able to create. But surely these advices should be taken into consideration and should be treated as a kind of answer to this threat we are just facing.
Great, thank you very much, Mr. Odouar. Would you like to address the same question, please? What is being done, what could be done, what should be done better? Or
I think that what history taught us is that revolution always finished by devouring its own children. Like look at the Bolshevik Revolution. Someone like Trotsky, he was the founder of the Red Army, the leader, he was the one who crushed the White Armies and even some part of the revolutionaries too, like in Kronstadt or in some part of Russia. And in the end of the day, he has been killed by an assassin sent by Stalin. And the same with lots of Bolsheviks, like even Beria, who was the leader of the secret police, it finished by being killed by its own men and other part of the Bolshevik party. And that's something we are seeing right now. Like the woke movement and the liberals, they want to be the opposition. They can't support to be the status quo, because now they are the real conservative in the sense that they are defending the status quo and they don't accept it. So they have to be even more radical. Look at someone like J.K. Rowling. A few years ago, she was this kind of hero of the left. She was defending feminism. She was fighting against the conservative, denouncing the conservative and the right wing as xenophobic, as sexist. And now she's transphobic. Now she's a symbol of conservatism, of hatred. When you ask the progressive. So that's really something that we can use against them and show to the people that our woke enemy are not even unified. Like, how can you, like for example, the feminists, they are more non-divided. Should they be in favor of transgenderism? Should they be in favor of immigration or not? That's something we can use against them. The same thing with homosexual. Like these people, they want to defend LGBT people, but who are attacking LGBT people in Western Europe? It's basically immigrants, like from Muslim countries or Africa. So there is something that you can use against them, saying, okay, but what are you defending? Are you really in favor of all of this? You can be in favor of more integration for LGBT people, more rights for women, but are you really in favor of transgenderism? Are you really in favor of giving I would say that puberty blockers to children? That's really something you can use against them. And at the end of the day, that's what I was saying during my introduction speech. But I really think that their big mistake is that they are leaving to us everything that was attractive from them. That's true that in the past, you can say there was some, to say that they had some very good artists, musicians, the leftists were capable of doing good movies. They were capable of producing very good arts. And now it's not the case anymore. They are not capable of producing music, producing art, because art needs freedom, and they are not fighting for freedom anymore. In the past, that's true that they were defending freedom, and in some aspects, sometimes they are right. Like some things, some women's rights, for example, they are fighting for in the past were a good thing, but now they are not fighting for this anymore. They are fighting against freedom. So we have to take back all of this. We have to take back the idea of science, the idea of progress, the idea of freedom, the idea of art, all of this we can take. Like it was, I don't know which conservative says that conservatism is a new punk, but that's true. We are now the counter culture, and we can use it. We can use it to show to our people that we are not the one who are fighting for all of this, and we are the one who are fighting for freedom right now. And that, I think that's really the 2 points we can use. Like to use the fact that now they are very divided, that they need to become more and more violent, more and more extremist, and the fact that the more they are extremists they are, the more values they are leaving to us. The idea of nation, the idea of culture, the idea of freedom, all of this, we should use it against them. We should use the weapons of the old left against the new left, I think.
Okay. Thank you very much. And Mr. Sal, the same question to you, if I may.
I'm working like campaign strategist for ANO party, and I can tell you there is only one way. Observe your enemy and strike. It's quite easy, because as described my co-speaker here, you know that left-oriented organization, how they works. There is conglomerate with state, whole NGOs together. You need to build same network, same organization, on same density, same funding, and use same techniques. That means using the influencers, new technique like AI and stuff like that. But one thing more, conservatives did their job done in US. Mr. Trump is president, so there is the turn on the European conservatives. That's all.
Okay, thank you very much. And then back to you, Mr. Doroshinsky. Could you tell us what could be done, or what should be done, or what is being done?
There's a lot of things that should be done, but I think we should concentrate on, we should focus on institutions, because the institutions are the kind of frames within which all of us operate, within states operate, within, media operates, within societies operates, and the broadest institution that we are dealing with at the moment is European Union. And what's the threat, particular, very concrete threat from European Union at this very moment, is the try to change the European treaties. There was more than 200 amendments to European treaties, and according to those amendments, such areas of state competences like defense, like family policy, like foreign policy, like education, will go to Brussels. So imagine that you cannot decide on what kind of army you have, what kind of tanks you buy, how many soldiers you have, because it all shall be decided in Brussels. Or imagine that you cannot create your own family policy, your own educational policy, because it's all is supposed to be run by European Union. On that you cannot have your own embassy, for instance, let's say in United States, because it would be enough for European Union to have one embassy in Washington. Surprisingly, the ambassador would be from France or from Hungary. It would be good from Germany. So that's the threat for the existence. In fact, for the existence of the Polish state, of the sovereign nations in European Union, and that's how we need to react to that kind of activities, and that's what we started to do. In fact, we prepared together with our Hungarian friends the document that shows two ways reforming the European Union. One of them is, in fact, reforming the European Union, and the second one is about totally demolishing European Union and replacing it with totally new institutions. So already the number of European media are, saying that the Polish and Hungarian conservative think tank are trying to destroy European Union, and to some extent they are right. So what's in that document? We think that we should we should propose that the countries should operate within the European Union on different levels of cooperation. So instead of having one level of strict cooperation, one level of the cooperation imposed by Brussels, the states should be free to choose on the scale of cooperation on different areas. For instance, some state might be willing to have a stronger cooperation in terms of energy or in terms of education. Other ones would be willing to cooperate on different areas than the ones to mentioned. And so that's one of the things that we propose. We propose to make European Council the most important body within European Union, not European Commission. European Council is comprised of the heads of the states. So the heads of the states itself, should be the ones who should decide, not the bunch of bureaucrats in Brussels. European Commission should be kind of secretary of the member states of European Union. And we also propose to extend the areas of issues where there is a need for unanimity within European Union. So all of that changes are supposed to make national states stronger than they are at the moment, and that's our plan for European Union. We have a report that contains those scenarios. We present it in different capital cities in Europe, and there was last thing. The idea of creating that kind of scenarios was that we need to have some positive proposal. We cannot just oppose what our enemies propose. We cannot just say no, no, and no. We need to have something on the table, something around which we can cooperate and around which we can create coalitions. And we need a positive vision of how Europe should cooperate and how Europe should looks like. And that's our aim.
Well, thank you very much for your participation. This is a lot of interesting ideas in a very short time. I'd like to thank all the members of the panel for their reflections. I'd like to thank Shea and for writing the book, and Chris for helping promote this book. And I'd like to thank the Center for Fundamental Rights and the Patriots for Freedom Foundation to promote this. And I think that this is a good place to gather together and talk about future, talk about positive plans, because otherwise we are on the defensive. We see that the United States have made a big change, and they are taking their country over. We are rooting for the United States that you win in that fight. It's not easy, but we hope that we are going to be next. And with the win of the United States, we hope that there's going to be less intervention of USAID, of Facebook, of Twitter, and other organizations that stifle free speech. Thank you very much for all your contribution. Thank you very much for your participation.